Okay, and now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Heckenlively, trained as a lawyer, now a sixth grade science teacher. He encouraged me to tell this story because he told me they can take away a lot of your rights, but you can always tell a story and write a book. At least to date, our First Amendment rights are still intact. I told the story to him in tapes. As a lawyer, he's trained to ask the questions the right way, the right questions. Investigate very carefully, which he did for every aspect of this book. But as he said one day when I was complaining about the sixth grade style of the science, he said, Judy, if they can't read the book, it doesn't do them any good. I think that was a comment on my writing. He said it in a really good way, which he says throughout. So this is a storyteller. He's a genius behind not only this book, but a new book he's got coming out telling the Brian Hooker story in Inoculated. And he tells the story in a human way with the victims and just introduces. And so it's my great pleasure. He also gives a very lively and exciting talk. And so it's my great pleasure.
With a name like Heckenlively, we have to live up to that, right? Okay, so my name is Ken Heckenlively. I was trained as a lawyer. For the past 10 years, I've been a science teacher. I met Judy probably about 6-7 years ago when she started talking about chronic fatigue syndrome, a retrovirus, and a possible connection to autism. I listened to her and I said, this is a woman who's going to get in trouble because she's honest and she has no idea what she's walking into. So I've really done my best to keep her story out there, and I think I've done that, and we're still here. Thank you for that introduction, Judy. That was wonderful. So I wrote Judy's book, wrote the book with Judy Plague, and it's done very well. To my knowledge, it is the most popular virus book of the last 20 years. We have 128 reviews on Amazon, and not a single review in any mainstream paper. What does that tell you? You listen to Judy talk, you know you don't want to be on the other side of a fight from her. That is a brilliant woman. Okay, so the next book that I'm writing is called Inoculated: How Science Lost Its Soul in Autism. And so it really started with the whistleblower story, and I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to tell the story of autism, because I think that's one of the things that we suffer from, is so many of the things that come out, it's difficult for us to really wrap our minds around the story. So I start with this question, and could the lights be a little bit lower on that? So I've got the question there, what does it feel like to be a writer covering corruption in science? If you don't know what that is, that's the movie poster from the movie Unforgiven, okay? Clint Eastwood is there, he's the gunslinger. Okay, next slide. So the question is, what character in Unforgiven do I most feel like when I'm writing? Because it's one of my favorite films, and there's a character I really identify with. And is it the Clint Eastwood character, William Money, the former outlaw who's trying to go straight, but is pulled into that one last job? Next slide. Or do I feel like Gene Hackman, who plays Little Bill Daggett, the former outlaw turned sheriff? Next slide. Or do I feel like the old gunfighter, English Bob, played by the great British actor Richard Harris? Next slide. No, I don't feel like any of these. Most of the time, I feel like Saul Rubinek. And you're all saying, who the heck is Saul Rubinek? Okay, he plays that little guy on the corner, W.W. Beauchamp, the nervous but intensely curious writer of dime store Western novels, trying to find out the truth about the bad men of the West. Now, W.W. Beauchamp is not an especially courageous character. The first time he is confronted by men with guns, when he walks out of the bar with English Bob and Little Bill Daggett confronts him, the first thing he does is pee his pants. Okay? That's often how I feel like, what the heck is going on with this thing? What did I get myself into? But I'd like to say that while W.W. Beauchamp is not especially courageous, he has a curiosity that just doesn't stop. If you've seen the film, you know that there's a big shootout at the end, and it turns out, Clint Eastwood blows away everybody in the bar, and W.W. Beauchamp is under some of the dead bodies. And so everybody's dead, everybody's cleared out. Clint Eastwood is standing there, and W.W. Beauchamp gets up from the bodies, and, the next thing he starts doing is he starts talking to Clint Eastwood and peppering him with questions. Wow, you killed everybody here. Yeah, I sure did. Well, how'd you know who to shoot first? Did you go for the one who you knew was the biggest danger, or did you just start shooting? Always been lucky with killing. And so, I'm not sure if I'm really courageous. I'm just really intensely curious. And when the whistleblower story came up, I just said, okay, here's an opportunity to tell the story of how terribly wrong things have gone in our world with our health. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm getting to the book, Inoculated. Chapter 1, The Call. I have a little opening with this, which is, a wrong number results in the unraveling of the greatest scientific scandal in history. And how was your day? So, you know that Brian Hooker, university biologist, was working in his office in 2013 when he got a misdial from Dr. William Thompson of the CDC. This leads to the unraveling of the story of how they concealed information about the MMR vaccine and autism. Specifically, it causes a 3.36-fold increase in autism among African American males and about a 7-fold increase in autism among isolated autism, which in plain language means you and me. Next slide. Okay, then I take the time to review the case of Andy Wakefield. So this story of the whistleblower, it's a story of science, but I really think at its heart, it's a story of humanity. And it's a story of 3 men with very differing things, characteristics that have happened to them. So you have Andy Wakefield, who's a truth teller, and he suffered for it. He suffered for it like Dr. Judy Mikovits suffered for it. You have Brian Hooker, who had the suffering of having a child with autism, and then trying for 10, 15 years to get information from the CDC, and being stopped at every turn. Freedom of Information Act requests taking years to get back to them, and they're not responsive. And then you have Dr. William Thompson, who is this tortured soul who has participated in crimes against humanity, but seems to be trying to regain his humanity by telling the story. Okay, next slide. Okay, so one of the things that really drives me crazy is that I have taught science for the past 10 years, and I know what science is supposed to be like. And so, as an autism parent, it has driven me crazy over these past 15 years to read science and go, this isn't science, I'm sorry. You went A, B, and then you skipped C, and then you say it's D. I'm sorry, it doesn't go that way. And 2 people who I think have violated this rule most egregiously have been Ian Lipkin and Mady Hornig of Columbia University. I look at their research into specific issues, and it's just crap. There's no other way to say it. When they looked, and it was kind of funny because actually, in their defense, I have to say, they started out trying to tell the truth. They looked at mercury, at thimerosal, and whether it affected the development of mice, and they came up with what I thought was a great theory, which is is that if you take mice with a certain genetic profile and subject them to thimerosal mimicking the US vaccination schedule, do you get something like autism? Yeah, they did, and they published that, and it's out there. It's not retracted, you can read it, but I kind of feel like somebody came after they published that and rapped them on the knuckles, and then they said they were going to be good little boys and girls, and so they're going to play ball with the CDC, and so then they did an absolutely atrocious MMR autism study with Wakefield, and then they did an absolutely atrocious study with the XMRV retrovirus and chronic fatigue syndrome, and it drove me crazy. A couple things that drove me crazy were, in the XMRV chronic fatigue syndrome study, for those of you who are scientists, know something about scientists. So here's something really simple that even my 6th grade students would get, is that the disease is called chronic fatigue syndrome. So if you exclude people who have a condition, a physical or psychological condition that may be associated with fatigue, you're probably not going to get the patient population you want. So to me, the simple flaws in their experiments would be clear to anyone with a passing familiarity with scientific principles, and I take them to town, and I give them the cross-examination that nobody else has given them. Okay, next one. What can I say? I'm a courageous person. I went full Edward Snowden. I contacted Congressman Bill Posey's office, and I got the whistleblower documents. Aren't I terrible? And then I read them. So I've got the documents on the whistleblower. I go through them in this chapter. I review his confession. I mean, I'm trained as an attorney. When there are things like confessions with supporting evidence, the person is usually convicted. He doesn't continue to work at that organization. But William Thompson does, so I go through the documents. Next slide. I really felt that this was a wonderful time to review the Simpsonwood conference, where the CDC ran away to Simpsonwood, Georgia, to defend mercury in vaccines. And again, I went full Edward Snowden. I got the transcript of the Simpsonwood conference, which is online, and anybody can get it at putchildrenfirst.org. And so, I basically just dramatized it and pulled out the important parts. And, when you've got a senior member of the scientific community standing up at the end saying, at the end of the day, it is my mission to immunize 100 million children across the world, and this will get in the way of that. You start to be a little suspicious. Next. Okay, again, I've gone to the radical side. I went and interviewed Beth Clay, a former senior staff member of the House Oversight Committee, chaired by Congressman Dan Burton when they looked into mercury and autism. So I went to her and also looked at the efforts by some really brave congressmen, like Congressman Dave Weldon, who actually gave a speech which really laid out how conflicted the CDC is in this entire investigation. Next slide. Again, I'm going radical. I interviewed a special master on the vaccine court who had worked for that court for 22 years. Amazingly, I have to say, he was really very open and honest about the flaws of the vaccine court, and I got some amazing admissions from this man who had worked at the vaccine court from the very beginning. And one of the questions I'd asked him was, I said, there are lots of allegations that you guys have paid money for kids who got autism as a result of their vaccines. Specifically, there's an article in the Pace University Law Review showing 83 cases. And I said, would you care to comment on that? And he goes, I'm glad glad you asked that, because it's really important that people get this right. I want you to know, we have never compensated a single person for autism caused by their vaccines. And I said, oh, okay. He goes, what we have done is that we are clear in saying that vaccines can cause encephalopathy. And we have been very clear in saying that autism may be caused by encephalopathy, but it is a damage. It is not the cause. So just kind of sitting there going, are you an idiot? But you know, I got him on the phone. I'm not going to call him an idiot. The interview will probably end at that point. So, you know, as an attorney, you just learn, keep people talking when they're burying themselves. So, you know, that interview's in the book. I also interviewed another really smart person, a law professor from Stanford University Law School. So this law professor had studied the vaccine court, and she actually published 2 really lengthy articles on it. So what she was doing in her article was she was looking at whether the vaccine court was working well, because it's an alternative dispute resolution court, and they wanted to see if this provided a good model for other alternative dispute resolution forums. And so her conclusion was, no, the vaccine court does not seem to be working well. The vaccine court should not be used as a model for any other court. And then I asked the next question, oh, so do you think the vaccine court should be abolished and it should go back into the regular court system? I don't feel qualified to answer that question. I'm sorry, you teach at Stanford? Is there a special kind of stupidity that exists at the Ivy League? I'm not sure, but I'm starting to get that impression. Okay, next one. Okay, chapter 8, those who oppose Goliath. It is interesting to hear the stories of people who have taken on the challenge of fighting these giants. One of them was Brandy Bond, who is profiled in the movie Maxed, and she has a very amazing story of being a sales rep for Merck, and then leaving that, living for 8 years in Europe, and seeing a different view of health, coming back to find that California is mandating vaccines for kids, and she just realizes that this is terrible. This is the pharmaceutical industry attempting to gain control of our bodies, using government as the vehicle. I mean, you know, I love being around libertarians because you guys understand these are questions of power. So, you know, the liberals may think, oh, big corporations are bad. The conservatives may think, government is bad. Well, how about putting governments and corporations together for real bad? Because it's a corporate agenda enforced by government power. It's everybody's nightmare. I also profile a story of Dr. Jeff Bradstreet, who actually was one of my daughter's autism doctors. 2 weeks before his office was supposedly raided, or they just came for a visit, he apparently shot himself while in a creek. And the gun was 30 feet away from where his body was, and nobody had seen him depressed. So, there's something weird going on. I'm not sure what it is, but I saw this guy 2 weeks before he supposedly shot himself. He was bright, he was cheerful. We made plans to have a conversation. I never got to have that conversation with him. So I'm honoring him by putting his story in the book and putting in the story of the investigation which is going on right now. Next. Curious alliances. I love this because, you know, when you start to see that the media is lying to you about certain things, you start to reassess, okay, who are the real bad people here? So after publication of his article, Brian Hooker became part of a group of individuals trying to work with other groups that were trying to get to the bottom of this. And, you know, it's a real curious grouping. You get libertarians, you get Scientologists, you get the Nation of Islam with Louis Farrakhan, who I just have to say, I'm reconsidering everything I think I know about the Nation of Islam, because, man, they are nice people, and they are warriors, and nobody in America today is as strong on the side of getting to the bottom of these questions as the Nation of Islam. I did a great interview with a guy named Minister Tony Muhammad, who seems like he's very high in leadership. I don't know if he's number 2 to Farrakhan or number 3. And, you know, he told me a great story about actually calling up Congressman Elijah Cummings, who, you know, he's congressman from Atlanta, which is where the CDC is. And so Minister Tony called up his old buddy Elijah Cummings and said, Elijah, you got to investigate this whistleblower thing. Oh, you know, I heard about that, Tony. They were up here the other day. I knew something was wrong was going on. Okay, great. You'll get back to me in a week? Yeah, I'll get back to you in a week. So, a week later passes, and suddenly Congressman Elijah Cummings says, I think vaccines are very important, Minister Tony. Well, yeah, Congressman, but that's not what I asked you. I asked you to investigate fraud. Well, I don't want to get mixed up in this. You go tell Mr. Farrakhan, I appreciate him, but I'm not touching him. What the heck is going on? So, you know, and it's interesting to listen to Minister Tony's perception, which is these farmer representatives are buying off the black ministers so that they won't talk about it in their congregation. So I don't know whether that's true or not. Like I said, I'm a writer, so I just go and talk to people and see what the stories are, and that's what I get. Yeah?
You got one more category, the 4th category, natural hygienist. Natural hygiene was the thing that helped us with our epidemic.
Perfect. Okay, next one. Okay, chapter 10, De Niro, Tribeca, and the Real Goodfellas. This is just a great chapter. I love this chapter because it's just so damn funny to me. Because, you know, I knew that Andy Wakefield was putting together a documentary and everything, but I never expected in a million years that it to blow up like it did. So I hear that he gets accepted to Tribeca, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Oh my God, what's going to happen to it? Oh, De Niro comes out and says he's going to stand behind this, and he's got an autistic son himself, and his wife is African American. Yay, we hit the absolute jackpot here. You know, so, you know, I called a friend on, you know, the next day, and I'm like, hey, we're there, we're crossing the milestone. You know, De Niro ain't gonna back down. Are you talking to me? Hey, are you talking to me? 2 hours later, De Niro folds. But then to his credit, De Niro came back, and in a interview on the Today Show, said that he may have made a mistake, and that this is a film that people should see. And then he drove people even more crazy by saying that he was going to put together his own vaccine documentary. So, you know, it's interesting to see what people do, but if my training as a lawyer taught me anything, it's how to make people look really stupid by just impeaching them with their prior inconsistent statements. So when you give me a story, which is on Friday I stand up and defend freedom of speech, and on Saturday I fold, I have so much fun with that. Okay, next, chapter 11, the Battle for California, America, my hometown. I've been a part of the efforts to stop SB 277 in California. My series on the Battle for California is something you can read online. And I've seen many things that have just absolutely terrified me. one of the most terrifying things that I saw was at one of the hearings, we had probably 800 parents testify in opposition. We had probably 20 people testify for it, and it passed. And I just said to myself, gee, I don't consider myself a cynical person, but after seeing that, I just said, I'm sorry, our democracy is being bought by people who do not have our best interests at heart. So I've also done things like I've met with my local congressman, talked to him. I also go over the efforts that Del Bigtree and Andy Wakefield have done in getting the House Oversight Committee to take up this investigation. I'm not saying anything that isn't out there, but supposedly the House Oversight Committee is actively investigating this. When they met with Congressman Jason Chaffetz, they asked him, why is it that when the Flint water story breaks, that a month later you have the people in front of you? And Congressman Chaffetz's answer was, actually, we had been investigating that for a year before the story broke. So, I'm not saying, I'm one of the last people to say count on government to help you or save you, but maybe some people are trying to do the right thing. Last one. Can science end the autism? Yes?
Go ahead and back from the microphone a little bit.
Okay. So, I always like to end on hope, because I think that while there is so much darkness in the story, there is light after it, and we have to go through the darkness to get to the light. And there is some very promising research going on using animal models, inducing autism in mice. It's really fun to look at the research about, how do they get an animal model of autism? Well, there's actually two ways that you can induce autism in mice. The first is called the maternal immune activation model, which is you make the pregnant mice think that they have a viral infection when they really don't, and for some reason, the mice come out with decreased novelty and all of these other actually measurable things in their urine and metabolites that show autism. And it's basically that their cells aren't communicating with each other. It's basically the strategy of, think of a medieval castle. When there's an enemy in the field, all the townspeople run into the castle, they put up the drawbridges, and they wait until the enemy leaves the field. Well, maybe what's essentially happening in autism is the cells aren't communicating with each other, and the drawbridges are up, and only minimal things are coming in to allow them to survive. Well, Robert Navio out of UC San Diego has done tests in 3 different animal models using a drug called Suramin, which was used to treat African sleeping sickness. And it has successfully reversed autism in those who have autism, the mice who have autism as a result of maternal immune activation. It also works in Fragile X autism, because basically the only problem with Fragile X is that the bodies of those individuals are not producing the medicines or the chemicals which will tell the cells to communicate with each other. So, wow, maybe we can cure autism, maybe we can cure Fragile X syndrome. And he's also done it in mice with a human age equivalent of 30 years old, and he's gotten the same result. So I really think that, one of the things that I think is difficult in our advocacy is we want the truth out there, and it's a hard truth. And I think that if we can focus on, if we tell these hard truths, if we get these hard truths revealed, maybe we're going to have a renaissance of health, a renaissance of recovery, a renaissance of awakening of all of these children like mine who cannot speak. And, maybe we're going through terrible times, but maybe there's just something so beautiful waiting for us if we tell the truth and get it out there. Okay, last slide. trying to search for historical precedents for what we're going through. Because I know that this really is a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-century problem, where you have this perfect storm of government, industry, concern about health. I mean, at one point in my life, I sold life insurance, and the only joke I ever got out of life insurance, because it's really hard to sell life insurance, is at least they don't call it death insurance. That would make it really hard to sell. And I think about this because this is really hard. This is difficult. This affects so many things because we have to rethink so many things. We have to rethink not just our faith in science and what scientists tell us, but what the government has done to us. You know, I mean, my God, every time that commercial comes on where Granny sneezes and turns into a wolf and then they put the baby in her arm, I want to scream. And you know, everything is so scientific. It is legal, but I also wonder about the spiritual. And I find such inspiration in what Nelson Mandela did in South Africa and what Martin Luther King did here. And when you read their writings, you see that they are fighting so hard for justice, and they are fighting not just for those who are the victims of injustice, but because they don't want to destroy their enemy, they want to convert their enemy. They want their enemy to understand what terrible things that they have done. And if they can do that, that kind of a victory is greater than any victory where you just throw them into a dark room and lock the door. And so I think that, you know, and it's difficult when you have a very severely affected child and you think to yourself, my life sucks. I have never gone on a family vacation with my entire family. You know, I can't get away for more than a day or two because I worry about the strain on my wife. But even with all of that, I try to cultivate a spirituality of hope and saying, it is really important that the truth be told. And so what I really liked that Nelson Mandela did in South Africa was he had his Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. And it was really interesting to see the setup of them, because if you wanted to avoid punishment for what you did, you had to go and testify about everything that you did. And they did something that was really interesting. There was no requirement that those who had perpetrated injustice apologize, because they felt that would be cheap. And I understand that principle. So the idea is, and I end my book saying, here are the people I want in the docket at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And if you tell the truth, maybe I'll cut a year or two off your sentence. But seriously, the truth needs to come out. And with you fighting, I know that we can do it. Like I said, it's a spiritual thing. I've been harmed, but I don't want to hate. I want to win the war, but I don't want to become the war. So I really hope that when my book comes out in November, you'll read it, you'll be inspired by it, you'll be encouraged by it, and it will create a catalyst for change. Thank you.
We have time for some questions for Kent. Anyone? Okay, got it.
The book is called Inoculated: How Science Lost Its Soul in Autism.
Question.
Not yet. I believe we're doing our best that it will come out on November 9th, Wednesday, November 9th, 2016. So put that into your notes if you're interested. Yeah, it should be on Amazon.
Tell me about your experience with the book plays. You know, I'm really, I haven't read it. You know, what would I get out of that? What's the collaboration between you and Dr. Judy? How'd that come about?
No, I was going to ask you another question.
Okay. You know, what I was thinking is, I had really followed the Andy Wakefield story, and I'd seen what they had done to Andy, and I thought they're going to do it again to Judy, and I wanted to cut short what they were doing. As you know, Andy Wakefield has spent 20 years being reviled. He's finally getting some measure of justice, and I thought, if I can put this book out there, if I can get people to talk about it, I can keep Judy out there. There were a couple things they were not able to do to Judy because she wasn't a medical doctor, because she has a PhD. They couldn't take away her license to practice medicine. So there were a couple things they couldn't do to her. And so I just wanted to put that story out there for everybody to read and put it out there in our words. And I think the fact that nobody has attacked it is really interesting. They're just hoping it will go away.
But it's been 6 or 7 years since I worked her. So can you show me a little bit more?
I'm trying. I'm
Okay.
trying.
Don't get in front of the speaker. Blow up.
Yeah, it's gonna blow up my head. So my question, and it's not a question, would you give us that quote from Ronald Reagan about the constitutionality of the country? Because I didn't put it in my talk tonight to do it.
One of the most interesting things as I sought to tell the story is to go back to the beginning and to find out, I think that all of this problem started from something called the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Now, it's so funny because all of us are made to feel like we're wackos because we say our kids were injured by a vaccine. But if I said, I was kidnapped by a UFO, and there was a 1989 National UFO Abductee Act, which paid me, you would think that UFO abductees would get a little more respect. You know, there's an actual act which says vaccine injuries are so serious that we have to form a special court. Well, can I get a little love from the public? So, but what was interesting to go back to find was that when this law was proposed, the Justice Department actually opposed its creation. And that brief was written by Ambassador John Bolton, who is now former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He was the Assistant Attorney General. And to go back to actually when President Reagan signed it, and he said, I'm signing this, but I have serious reservations about the constitutionality of many of the provisions, and I hope that it will be addressed in the next Congress. So, I started the story out as, hey, from the very beginning, there were people who said, this might be a really bad idea, and it has been.
There was in 2009-10, there was a YouTube activist that went by 4409. And I remember there was the CNN, Wolf Blitzer, and Dr. What's-His-Face gets up there, I'm sorry?
Sanjay Gupta?
Gupta gets up there and they go, well, we just had a ruling from vaccine court that, and in this video he goes, what? Vaccine court? That's vaccine court. How is it funded? How are they, they even get, I want an Ernie court. I mean, I'm just wondering how this happens.
Ernest, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you how the court is funded. The court is funded by a 75-cent tax that goes along with every vaccine. So the pharmaceutical companies are removed from the equation. Also, the attorneys are paid by the United States government. They work for the Department of Justice. So you are not suing the vaccine companies, you are suing Uncle Sam. So your taxes fund the vaccine court, and they fund the attorneys who go after the parents of vaccine on injured children, while also at the same time not providing any studies on the safety, because the CDC promotes vaccines and then does studies on their safety.
Is there a parallel? Is there other industries that have this?
You know, the only real comparison I can use to this is when there were allegations that priests were molesting kids in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church gets to do its own investigation and says, hey, our priests are not pedophiles, or 6% of them. We've investigated this, and we think that this is so damaging to the faith that we will not do any further investigations.
Sounds like a police shooter.
We are trending in which direction? The first thing is education awareness. People know what's going on. You have to where your book is not, like you say, even being brought up. It's not attacked. It's not, there's no comparison. There's something, it's not referenced, in any way. And so I'm wondering, where are we at? Are we at a tipping point? Is it just going to get worse until people abandon government in general? Or is there a medical, we're going to take it back? I mean, where are we at?
We're at a place where 6% of the public trust the mainstream media. I think that that is a really interesting place to be, and I feel like we're in the days before the French Revolution, where the elites just don't understand how much they are hated by us, and how much that we just want to, we want to wreck their system and put in the system that we're supposed to have in this country, which is a system of checks and balances and where the people are in charge.
And just eat cake. Scott?
What I'm concerned about is why the parasites and the scumbags are called the elite.
Agreed.
Good PR.
Hashtag I agree.
Is it truly constitutional for Congress to have created that law which takes away our rights and it still leaves people being injured and not really having any recourse by this kangaroo court that they have set up? I mean, is that really constitutional to have a court operated outside of our judicial system the way it's supposed to be run?
By my reading of the Constitution, no.
When you give government the ability to determine through their Supreme Court, this taxpayer-funded IOU, for them to determine, government itself, judges paid for by government, appointed by government, for them to be the ones that determine constitutionality, what do you think was going to happen? You're going to ask government, is this constitutional? They'll go, yes. So it's constitutional.
Ernie, that is why I so love being among libertarians, because they get that.
Skip to the end.
This is how it gets corrupt, when everybody who's involved is in charge. I'm sorry, even the police get policed.
Go ahead, sir.
The 1986 law, which I'm sure you read, Heckenlively, it has conditions in it that the pharmaceutical companies, the manufacturers, have to adhere to those conditions as part of that law. If you read the law and those conditions, they're not doing anything. So, is there some way, as a lawyer, that you could say the vaccine manufacturers aren't doing what they're supposed to do, so they're not covered anymore?
There are some efforts to do that. I think one of my worries is that we live in a society that is still so brainwashed by the pharmaceutical companies that it's not necessarily that the pharmaceutical companies are paying off the judges who are hearing this, but it's sort of like to become a person who is a federal or a state judge, there is sort of a winnowing out of people with rebellious tendencies. I mean, I'm a teacher. I understand that I have so many students whose greatest, ambition in life is to make me happy. So I give them a good job. And I love those kids, but I also want to have the kids in society who will look at an authority figure and say, you're a piece of shit. I don't believe you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. You'll get to you. You know, one thing I wanted to say, and I appreciate the comments about libertarians. I think my radio show is called Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. The reason I give so much reference to the Declaration of Independence is because it described what kind of government we were supposed to have. You know, one that protects individual rights, you know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And that would take any form. I mean, my life, my liberty, my pursuit of whatever I want to smoke, ingest, say, do, whatever doesn't bother you. When government becomes destructive of that, it is your right, it is your duty to alter or abolish. So I always thought that was awesome. When you get bad, we'll like undo it. Nope, not allowed, so saith this gavel and gun. The only way that authority ever acts, the newspaper's back there against the wall. There's an article in there called Authoritarian Sociology. I really suggest that you read that so you understand where the solution is. It's not them, it's us. We are so in awe because 4 out of 5 dentists says, 4 out of 5 doctors smoke this brand of cigarette. I mean, you know, it's this reverence for celebrity, or lab coats, or shiny badges, or fine hats, always backed up by the available gun. That reverence is the problem. It is they have changed us up here. It's what they take literally trillions of dollars over generations of mandatory youth indoctrination and propaganda and war and all, to get you in the mindset that you are to respect their authority, even when they're lying and you know it. But if they would tell the truth on this one thing, then they would be good. No, they wouldn't. So I am encouraging you to start thinking about becoming your own standards. Quit trying to get them to change. Even if they did, it wouldn't stick. We change. That's why we went to so much effort all this week, as many of these DVDs as we could burn. If we get more material from Kent and the guys here, we'll add to that, we'll get a compilation, we'll do it. Now, we'll get some. Because it's changing us, not them. Politicians don't, lead, they follow you. Quit trying to change them. The entire system is set up so you can't change it. And you're going to find that out this election cycle. We're coming up on break. I want to give you a final closing. Anything you want to say? I'm sorry. Were you going to? Go ahead, Anna.
I had a question about the CDC and the proposed, I don't know if it's legislation or what you would call it, where they can detain us at any time and vaccinate and medicate and, all of those things. Do you know the timeline on that?
As soon as they can get away with it.
Hashtag agree.
I know they're accepting public comments until October 14th, but what kind of time frame after that are we looking at?
I personally have no idea. James, do you know?
Yeah, the time frame is go home, call your congressman, call your senator, write a letter, and tell them that you don't want those proposed rule changes. That's the time frame. You were just told the change is you. Well, I'm not going to sit around and wait. We shouldn't sit around and wait for those rules to take place. But if they arrest me, and they arrest and detain Marcy, we're never going to accept the vaccine. It's like a long vacation. Passive resistance is amazingly powerful. And if we have the opportunity for massive resistance, what if we didn't show up? I've heard so many people say, don't hire a pediatrician. Just don't go to the pediatrician's office. Go to your chiropractor. Right? We have to teach our fellow Americans that they have the right not to show up. Okay.
I kind of really concur with that agreement, with that sentiment. I'm 74 years old. I have a fairly afflicted immune system in the sense that I'm allergic to a lot of things. I have an autistic brother. So a lot of the people here spoke to me about the fact that multiple channels, and I feel I'm at indoctrinated for 50 years, and I don't intend to be. And what I'm gonna tell my congressman is, the revolution begins with me. If you pass that mandatory law, you come at me with vaccination, I come at you with a gun. It's that simple. I don't have any other choice.
Yeah, no, I could not imagine. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity to close, and I'll say something at the end, and we'll take just a couple of minutes while we get the other speakers up to the panel. Please go ahead and give out whatever information you hold to you.
Thank you for coming. This is just wonderful. That's really all I have to say. Thank you very much.